Lura Ketchledge, who had a near-death experience when she fell off of a horse. And I'm super excited to talk to her today because, as you know, on my show, I really love hearing people who have had a life review and the significance that it has after they come back to this lifetime. So Laura, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and just tell your story in whatever way you would like, and then we will dive in and ask questions.
Okay. The whole thing started in actually, can I preface it to my first experience?
Yes, please do.
I was a horse crazy kid. I mean, just loved them. So a few days before my 13th birthday, I went with friends to a stable. The horse ran off with me and I was unable to control it. And it was a horse you never should have put a little kid on anyways. So the horse ran off with me and made it to the highway. And the asphalt was very slick and hot because it was August and it was all tar. And, you know, this was like 1973. The horse flipped in the air. And as that happened, I left my body. I was slingshot backwards and looking like a spectator. And it was, my vision was more intense. I was a little kid. I was scared to death. I wasn't crying or hysterical, but I knew something terrible was about to happen to me. So what happened is I was about 12 feet behind my body. And then I just slung, you know, like a slingshot, went right back into my body, and the horse crushed me and fell on top of me. It was a very grisly accident. If I hadn't put my hands out in front of my face, it would have killed me. That was my first out-of-body experience. I really didn't know how to process it. Somehow it felt kind of natural. Then I really didn't talk about it with anybody because I was afraid of being, you know, teased or mocked or, you know, you're stupid, things like that. A little girl thinks.
Did it affect you though?
Yeah. Yeah.
In what way?
I didn't know something like that could happen.
Yeah.
I really didn't. But I felt ashamed to talk about it and I wanted to, but I was really very, very badly injured. I had my leg crushed and it was a terrible accident, which took me a very long time to recover, a lot of therapy. So that was my first inkling into out-of-body experience. So a few years later, of course, I'm horseback riding again.
You got back on the horse.
Oh, yeah. 6 months after the accident. And I went on later to have my own horse farm. So, you know, I love horses and it wasn't the horse's fault. It was a mismatch. Anyways, it was Centerville, Virginia, a place that I'd ridden a lot at. Not a great rider, but I'm fairly decent. I was a little out of shape. It was April. I'd been riding most of the afternoon and having a great time. And I met up with these two other riders on the trail. And we had the bright idea to race back to the barn. It wasn't my brightest moment. So what happened is we were going very fast and the terrain got very rough. I went from a field to rocks and I couldn't slow down the horse. And then the horse just absolutely had this burst of energy and tripped, and I knew I was going to fall, you know, that dread, like, oh, you know, but I never hit the ground. I left my body. I remember tilting to the right. I was falling to the right, and I was thinking the horses behind me are going to trample me. So I went to the right, and just as I leaned just a little bit, I felt this click, this whoosh, this disconnect from my physical body. And it was so abrupt and shocking. It's like I left the planet. So I went into, they always say, the velvet tunnel. The tunnel was black, pitch black and dense, and it had texture to it. It was soft yet dense and airy. I don't know how else to explain it. Those are actually conflicting explanations, but it was like that. And I was going at a very high rate of speed, and I wasn't hurt. I never hit the ground. I didn't take the pain with me. It was so distressing because here I am, I'm 19 years old. I've got a really cool life. I got a great job, a crappy car that I love, and a horrible apartment that I adore. And I was dating, I was having a good time, I was modeling. This was a really great time in my life. And this happened so abruptly. There was no preparation. So I'm in this tunnel and I'm going fast and I know I'm dead. And grief is an understatement. I felt grief-stricken, distressed. I didn't want to be dead. I didn't want any of these things to be happening, but they were happening. So after going at this very high rate of speed, I'm connected to my grandfather, and he died when I was 12. And Laurie, he was like the best person in the world. He was my hero. And he waited for me, you know? He waited
He
for
want
me.
to cry too.
No, I mean, you have no idea how good it was to see him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he didn't look young. He looked older, like I knew him when I was a little kid, but he didn't look sick. No traces of the horrible cancer, no anxiety from being in pain, no terrible thing hanging over his head like that disease. So I connected with him, and emotional isn't the word I could put into it. It was very spiritual. And he was my guide. And I went through something that was wonderful and unpleasant at the same time. I went through a life review. Now, in a life review, you're your own judge. There is, to me, in my experience, there is no heaven and hell, at least nothing that I perceived or saw. Spiritually, you have like this awakening, but, there's no devil with a pitchfork or any saints or pearly gates. So I went to this place, and it was another dimension or layer outside of the physical world. And I went through a life review. Now, when you're in your life review, you are a spectator, but also in tandem, you feel that other person's, that you're interacting, their emotions, sometimes not so good. If you've been kind of a crappy person or been short with somebody, that's not a good thing. I wasn't a bank robber, hadn't committed any crimes. I was just a stupid teenager. So I didn't have any, terrible things to go through. But when you've done something really nice for somebody, something extraordinary, it's very big. It's very big on the other side when you've done something good. Like I rescued a kitten one time, and that really meant something, which I thought was kind of insignificant, a thing in my life, but it really wasn't. Also, you perceive the other person who you've hurt or who you've helped. And I'm not going to go into the details of each scene, but it wasn't the most pleasant experience because I'd been short-sighted. I'd been, stuff like that. But what I can say is, everyone says, oh, you've got to be good. I don't say that exactly. What you've got to do in this life is do no harm to others. That's the biggest thing. Do no harm, just like a physician. Don't screw with somebody's destiny. Don't be vicious to somebody when you can, even though maybe you think they deserve it. That is not a good thing. That really matters. But a couple of the good things that I saw was how I protected this one girl from a bully and how important it was to her. I didn't realize it was such a big deal to this young girl who'd been really, really traumatized by a few bullies in high school. Just, things like that. And it wasn't pleasant because I had seen my whole life from the time I was a little kid up until the time I was 19. And it happened all at once. But there were layers. How do I put it into words? There was a depth to each experience, but it happened simultaneously. And I know that is a contradiction, but time and is not what it is over in non-physical reality or death or whatever you call it, the spirit realm, or you can put any label on it you're with. you want to. It's just non-physical reality. That's what I call it. It was pretty emotional for me, and it still is to think about. Did it make me a better person? Probably not. Just a little bit more aware. But I had this life review, and I'm telling my grandfather, how long it had been, how, gut-wrenching it was. And then, whoosh, I'm not with him. I'm in another dimension layer. And this is the good one, because it was like a real rush, like the most fun experience you can say. Just the movement was fun. It was a real rush to move. And I was suddenly at source. And it was kind of like they say, in people's definitions, I went into this bright place. And it sort of looked cloudy, but it wasn't. What it was a collection of all the parts of me, all the parts of Lura, all the players I had been throughout my life. So I was like floating in the sea of love. The closest I can say it was like clouds, but it wasn't. But you're wrapped in this warm cocoon of love, and bliss is not even a description. It's so wonderful and peaceful. And I could hear music coming through in random waves. And it was bright. There was a light, but there was no sun. And there was a blueness into the air. And I couldn't define it, like who these people were, but I knew it was safe. And I knew it was aspects of me. Now, some people may say that's heaven. I think it's source. It's your source. And then as soon as I was feeling good and going with it and wanted to ask questions, it was over. And then I was in this other chamber. Now, my grandfather wasn't with me, but I could see off in the distance to the right, planet Earth, or at least what I thought what planet Earth was. So this was a layer or a dimension outside of physical reality. And it was like this big chamber, and there was two people guiding me, and I couldn't make out their faces. So I'm in this place, and I'm standing there, and they were explaining how on my right side was all of the lives I had as a male. The left was all I had as a female, like in a row. Of course, me being a girl and very girly, I could never conceive that I had ever been a male, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like what I was being shown. I don't like the idea of reincarnation. I don't want to come back again and be, get braces. I'm sorry.
Me neither.
But imagine every race, every creed, you've done it. And there was a lot of lives. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm like an addict or a chronic repeater. I must not have gotten it right. So I'm sitting there and thinking all these things. And you know what I realized, Laurie? I've been the victim and the victor. I've been the follower and the leader. I've been black and white and Indian and probably living in all these different times. And I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember or take that wonderful wealth of knowledge in all of these past lives and take it with me. And that really made me angry. I wanted to get the knowledge that these souls had, or these aspects of myself, and it was unreachable. I went over and I touched a man, and he was kind of older and kind of grumpy. He didn't look too good, but he was Caucasian. And then I just recoiled from him and looked over and went and touched and saw the face of this woman. And she looked like this really mean lunch lady I had in second grade. She was like, God, they didn't show me the winners, did they?
Were these your past lives?
Yes.
They were.
And there was a lot of them.
When you say a lot, how many do you think you had?
I could perceive 50 on each side.
So at least 100.
Yeah.
Do you think we all have that many lives?
I have no idea. I can tell you what works for me, and I have like my hypothesis. But you think about it in the afterlife, if you get a glimpse, you're just going to see what you're going to see. You don't know the whole thing. I'm not that smart. I couldn't figure it out. I don't have the secrets to the world, but I did see that I had all these past lives, and this place was really surreal. This was big. I could only perceive a little bit, and I couldn't get a grasp on who was guiding me and talking to me. I could hear their thoughts, but they didn't come in either male or female, you know?
Have you since figured out who they are?
Only two.
And who are
So
they?
I'll tell you that after I finish this. I can give you some
Okay.
hypothesis. Okay, some educated guess. Okay, so remember, I'm 63 years old. I've been around the block, but I was 19 at the time. This did not feel good. This was distressing. This is not what the Bible had told me. I believe still in Judeo-Christian values, but I'm not one for the literal sense. So this was not a very pleasant feeling. It was more like, there's more questions than there were answers. So I was slingshot back, and I'm with my grandfather again, but we're in a different layer. And I know that I could feel that I was closer to my body or physical reality or whatever you want to call it to. Now, this layer was very interesting because it was mauve. It was this beautiful mauve pink that just doesn't really exist here. And it was, it's like lighter. And then, I forgot to tell you something. I'm not going in order. Okay, after I was shown all these past lives, I thought to myself, this is really not what the Bible said. I wonder about the tree of life. And boom, I was in another dimension or layer or whatever you call it, or consensus reality. And this was the beautiful. There's the ocean. I'm at the shoreline, and on the right, there's these rocks, and you can see that there was windows in the rocks that somebody had carved out homes inside these beautiful, majestic rocks, cliffs. And it was a beautiful, beautiful ocean. And I was thinking about the tree of life, and then the tree of life, or the tree I saw, I wouldn't say it was a biblical tree of life, came right out, was standing like the ocean's here, came right out here. It was very, very tall and majestic. It was a pine tree. The bark was white, but it had depth, like a core of almost a green, light green moss. And it was so beautiful. I wanted to cry. And it was just rooted right in that ocean, a few feet from shore, just standing there. And then I realized non-physical reality is more thought receptive. It is more, if you think it, you can manifest it to some degree. So I'm figuring out that, and that's when I was shot back and with my grandfather. So I didn't get to stay as long as I'd like to these different places or levels and get to ask good questions. Shall I continue?
I'm curious, did your thoughts create that tree? Or do you think you asked for it and you were just taken to that tree?
I think I can give you some, let me finish the story, and I can tell you some things I figured out later.
Okay.
So here, I'm 19 and, pretty much spazzing. I get back to my grandfather, and I just looked at him. I said, this life review, this has been so long. It felt like I'd been gone for hours, like hours. So he was giving me a message telepathically, about, you have to go back, you have to return, you can't stay. His lips weren't moving, but it was his voice. My grandfather had very large hands, so I just wanted to reach out and get his hand so I wouldn't go back. And I couldn't. And going back is like, when you're taking the cork out of a wine bottle that's been, fighting you for 10 minutes.
Yes.
It was like the reverse of that. It was in the solar plexus. And I did have form, I did have a body, and I just like, oh my God, there's a yank right in your solar plexus backwards. And I'm in the field, and the two gentlemen that had saved my life, these two young men who were so nice and worried, and I guess one of them been crying because he thought I was dead for good. I felt so disconnected to him. I felt so disconnected to everything. And I looked around the field and I just thought to myself, and I think I muttered, this is not reality. And people were talking about me. There was a car down in the field to take me to the hospital. Somebody else was checking, more worried about the horse. And yes, I've gotten emails. The horse was fine. The horse was fine. Everybody's like so worried about the horse. The horse was fine. She was fine. She didn't take too bad of a tumble. She was up there and eating grass, and I saw her to the left, and I thought, well, I guess she, no worse the wear. But me, I was pretty injured. I had a broken nose, a broken finger. There wasn't a part of me that wasn't bruised, swollen, sore. I mean, it hurt a lot. But they got me in the car, and then I passed out. I fainted, but nothing happened psychically or spiritually or anything like that. They got me to Fairfax Hospital. Somebody had called my mom. My mom worked at Fairfax. She was a registered nurse. And they got me in there, and they did x-rays and made me pee in a cup, and, all the wonderful things doctor did. And the nurses were wonderful. But when I tried to tell the doctor, he went from being very kindly to very, very nasty, and shamed me in front of everybody, and asked me what drugs I was taking. Well, my little redheaded Irish mother stood up and said, my daughter doesn't take drugs, and if she did, she'd tell me first. She had a fall. She wasn't breathing. We need to admit her. And he went on and on about drug addicts and kids these days and wanting pain meds. And I said, I don't want any pain meds. I want to go home. What was not pleasant was when I came back to my body, there was an urgency that I felt, a panic. I had to talk to my grandmother. I had to tell her about my grandfather. I had to be the messenger. He's okay. He's looking after me. I had to, tell my grandmother. And also I was in love with this young man at the time. I thought it was love, thought it was wonderful. And I couldn't wait to get home and call him. And when I did, he wasn't alone. He had another woman there, and that was a drama in itself. But when I got home, my mom took care of me, and she was checking me all the time to see if there was any bleeding in the brain and whatnot. And I had to get up every 2 hours, and, it was just awful. But the urgency was there, and it took me a good 12 hours to calm down. Now, I eventually told my mom, told my grandmother, my late sister, and I told my mother and grandmother exactly what my grandfather was wearing, and he did have a shirt and pants like that. He would wear those dress pants like from the 1960s, those khaki pants with a thin leather belt, and that has a little fake pocket with a button on the left. Mm-hmm. So that's what he was wearing. He didn't have his glasses. And I told him, all three of them, how my vision was crisper. Music was clearer. Everything was more intense. There's no comparison to it here.
Does it feel more real on that side too than here?
About 1,000 times more.
1,000 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the dream?
Pardon?
Is this the dream?
A dream of what?
This reality.
No. Okay. I can give you what I think, how it really, I believe it works.
I would love to hear that.
Okay. But I want to preface this. after my near-death experience, things started happening for me. I saw like my aunt when she died, and nobody had to call me, came
So
into
you
my
knew
room.
before? You knew before you'd heard the news?
Oh yeah, that happened quite a few times to me as the years went on. More things happened to me. It opened up something. When I want it to happen, it never does.
Of course.
When I do it, the message comes in sideways. But it was just, if anything I accomplished during my entire life, Laurie, is this. During my life as Janice Lura Ketchledge, I became aware.
Mm.
That was my big accomplishment. It didn't matter about my books or my movie or anything that I've ever done, or the mountains I've climbed. That was in this life I became aware, and this was huge.
What does that mean? Because you said you've had other lifetimes, so you've been back. Does
Mhm.
becoming aware do something or change something with whether maybe you'll come back again or not, do you think?
Gosh, I'd like to be a last timer. I'm doubtful. Um, I don't think, yeah, I don't think I want to do this again. No.
I think everybody says that.
Yeah, I haven't had the easiest life. When I did have my near-death experience, there was a woman that I saw to the side, and she said, "You're going to have a very hard life when you go back."
Who was she?
I have no idea whatsoever.
And was she right?
Oh yeah, yeah. A few years later, I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease. I spent 30 years in and out of hospitals, 28 surgeries, 300 plasma transfusions, and now I take a weekly biologic. So it has not been a picnic. Has not been a picnic, but I've had a great life too. I'm not complaining. I'm alive. I'm above ground. People have it worse, but it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't pleasant. I had all the medical bills. So basically, I had things start to happen after the near-death experience, and I was like pretty upset about it. So I finally I went to my grandmother's, and I just spilled my guts about all these things. I said, you know me, I'm not crazy, but I tried to talk to a therapist about it. I tried to talk to a friend or two, and I got shut down. And she sat down, my grandmother, who was also named Laura, and she said to me, "I thought so." She said, "I thought so." She said her mother had the gift. My great grandmother, her mother, was able to, she could do healings on people, and ailing people would come to her in Canada in the 1800s, and she saved her son from a fatal bee sting. And she had these abilities, like when someone would die, she'd know when, she'd see them, and then they'd get a letter a few months later, so and so had died, and things like that. So I wish somebody told me this earlier. I would have been a little bit happier about that. But her son, my uncle, also was kind of like me. Now, I just want to preface this. Everybody's got a pinch of psychic, just this much. Everybody's got that intuition, that's weird thing that happens. When you've had a near-death experience, maybe you get a little more. Nobody's got a cup. Nobody has it. I just think you get some ability because something's opened up or loose, or I don't know what, but I think you can get these things. I would never have a 1-800 number, give me money and I can tell you where your dead aunt Sally left the silver, nothing like that. But the experiences were just a little upsetting, and I've had years to pull it together and grapple with it, and I'm fine. And if somebody thinks I'm that it was a dream or a hallucination or a head injury, they can think what they want. I know what happened. And 100 years from now, I can go up to them and say, "I told you so."
On the other side, yes.
Yes. I look forward to that, to a few people. But it's so joyful going to source. It's so beautiful to know that there's a continuation of existence after you die.
Yes, absolutely. Laura, that story and experience is incredible. And also heart-wrenching in some ways.
Mhm.
So you just mentioned Source. I want to go back to what you were
Mhm.
saying. So you said that when you were with Source, Source was a presence and a light.
No,
Did
well,
it have
there's
a
a
body?
light. There's a light. It wasn't it the cat's trying to move the laptop, excuse me. And we have a star over there. She's trying to photobomb me. Um, Source for me was the farthest I went out of my left physical reality. It was the farthest out. There's probably something beyond that that I have no comprehension of. But this was, I was floating in a sea like an ocean of clouds that were bright and airy, but they weren't clouds. This is just the closest I can convey. And there were other parts of me, other personalities in this group that were holding me, taking me through this, and we were all together. So I think the collection of all your past personalities and past lives come together and merge. That's what I'm guessing. That's what I took from it. Hey, I could be wrong, but that's what I gathered.
Have you heard the term higher self before?
Oh, yes.
So do you think that you were
Oh,
experiencing your
absolutely.
higher self?
I wasn't my higher self.
And did you ever look in that experience? Because you've talked about what your grandpa looked like. Did you ever look at yourself or see yourself in that experience?
I had I didn't feel my body. I felt my body in the other dimensions. I didn't feel my body there, but then I didn't take inventory either. So I was 19. So I wasn't as collected and calm. Like if this happened at 63, I'd be a lot more, inquisitive. I was just shell shocked. I mean, I was thinking, I'll never see my boyfriend again. Well, good riddance, when I caught him cheating, it did me a favor. But it was tough to take, yeah, that was 40 years ago. I was a kid. Kids, it's more traumatic for a kid than an adult.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It was going to my higher self. I'm absolutely, definitely, firmly believe that. Yep.
So can we go back and talk about your life review?
There were some real painful things in it. Real painful that I'm just.
Well, let's talk about some of the good things. So can we talk about some of the things that you experienced and why you think it's so important now to do no harm?
Oh my God. Because people are very fragile, more fragile than you realize.
You mean the people that we interact with on a daily
People in general, people in
Okay.
general are more fragile. When you hurt somebody, when you're rude or you're cruel, it has a very, very negative cascading effect on that person, even if you're sharp. Or let me put it a little bit different. Let's say you're a politician and
Okay.
you started a war to make some money. I'm not naming names. You
Okay.
started a war to make some money. All these young men get killed, civilians get killed, people come back mutilated, and everybody's angst. When you have your life review, you're going to go through each and every soldier's point of view and their family's point of view and feel what they felt and how you negatively affected them.
So could you see in your life review when you had a negative effect on somebody, could you see how that was going to affect their life?
Well, I didn't do anything terribly profound because I was a kid.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, I was sharp a few times to other kids and how much it hurt them. Yeah, I felt it. And I'm really
Or
sorry.
or like the girl that you helped with the bullying,
Oh, that was
could you see the effect that that had on her life in that
well, I
place?
mean, it was, yeah, but I saw what the other bullies did to her and how she had contemplated suicide.
Wow.
And she was a
And
nice
you
little
didn't
girl.
have any knowledge of that
I just thought I
before.
was helping. I was trying to help the kid out. I mean, she was a nice girl. And there was two girls that were just vicious to her for no reason, for sport,
Mhm.
cruelty for sport. And I hated those two girls for what they were doing. But see, I could stand up. I was a little bit of a mouthy kid. I could stand up to those two girls the way this other little girl couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to, buffer as much as I could. Had I gone back in time, I would have called back her parents. I would have called these little snot-nosed girls down, and I would have shut them down. And I would have gotten radical about the situation. I didn't know how bad this other little girl was hurting. It was terrible for her. She was wounded to the quick because this went on for a couple of weeks at school. It's really mean. But people will talk about dying, and they come back and it's like they're singing kumbaya. We've got to be nice and love, and it's just like a little bit much. I'm just trying to tell people, do no harm. That's it. Just like a physician. Screwing up somebody's destiny, interfering with what they could be, is like the worst thing you can do. And also another nice thing is, when I rescued a kitten, I didn't realize that was a big deal. Things, when you've done something really good, or, so that really helped, it's bigger than I can express.
I've watched so many different stories of NDEs and out-of-body experiences. And it does seem like the theme is that we think as humans that we need to do all of these big, giant things in order to feel like we've accomplished something. But when you're on the other side and you review your life, so many people talk about the small, teeny tiny, what they perceived as even insignificant things were the ones that were reviewed and almost revered on the other side.
Can I tell you how my grandfather came back to save me?
Yes.
Okay. When I was 34 years old, I went into the hospital, to get tests, and I had an inflamed liver. Okay. Autoimmune. Miserable, but not serious. Just a miserable thing to have. And it just kept getting worse. So I went to the doctor. Oh, we can't run these expensive tests again. I think you should. It's getting worse. So I had to go to my mother's. I was really in bad shape. And I woke up and I was sitting up and I was kind of hungry, and I was, thinking about the morning. I got to put the dog out, stuff like that. And my grandfather walked in the room in living color. He walked into my bedroom. He was wearing a flannel check shirt, those same like gabardine pants. I couldn't make out his shoes, but he came over and he sat on my bed and he put his hand on my stomach and said, spleen, spleen. And then he dissolved.
Wow.
So I got up. I wasn't scared. I didn't understand it. I went over to my mom. I said, where in your body is your spleen? I had no idea where my spleen was. And I told her what happened. And we were both pretty shaken up, and we didn't know what to make of it. So a couple days later, I'm sitting in bed, I'm reading, there's nothing going on, and I hear in my left ear, spleen, spleen. And then I got a shock or a wave of energy of distress. So I told my mom, and then I went to the doctor and said, I think you need to do a splenectomy, and I think you need to do it now or run some tests. I think my spleen's in jeopardy.
What were they when you said this? Self-diagnosing.
Didn't like it. Doctor didn't like it. You know what I did? I went to another one, sat down and told him I flat out, because I felt like I was going to die if somebody didn't take action. He had heard a lot of things in his time. He wrote me a physician's order for a splenectomy. So he said he'd heard strange things. He said, you're really in pain, aren't you? And I said, I'm in agony. Okay. When they went in and got the spleen out, I had a large ball. I had hemorrhaged, and I clotted like this, like a man's fist hanging out on the spleen. So I was ready to bleed to death, maybe hours, maybe a couple of days. I didn't have very long. The doctor was just like, well, it's a good thing we did it, not wanting to elaborate. Now that was okay, but the surgery was so bad and so painful that I didn't know if anybody did me a favor. It was terrible. And I got double pneumonia, and it was terrible surgery, but it did save my life. So I realized that he's close by. He's looking after me. um, he still loves me.
Wow. That's incredible.
I
So
think
do you think that we are always guided, and do you think that he is one of your spirit guides?
I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to think so. I think I can have access to him, but I don't know what he is doing. I mean, my grandmother and my parents are dead, so I would imagine they're together in some sort of consensus reality. Um, I don't know. I know I'll see him again. I'm not worried about that. I know he still loves me, and I just think that was miraculous that he came to help me.
Absolutely. Well, you're reminding me of something that I've thought about for a long time. I don't think that anybody dies before it's their time, because I've watched enough of these near-death experiences for people who maybe have even tried to take their lives into their own hands and have come back. So, can you speak to that about people dying before their time? Do you think that that is a thing? Or do you think that we have kind of a job to do or a purpose here that keeps us here and until it's time for us to go?
I don't think you're gonna like my answer,
I just want to hear what it is.
but I think you can be taken before it really is your time. If somebody, murders you, or there's an accident, somebody else's behavior interferes and ends up killing you. That wasn't supposed to happen. I think there's always the wild card of chance in our lives. I think we have more than one exit time.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe I've dodged the bullet a few times because I'm very stubborn. I really want to live. I want to do it, want to finish things out. And I don't think, like, if you're really, really in a bad way, um, I don't see, I don't think exiting is a sin if you're really in a bad physical way. I'm not pro suicide at all. Um,
Of
but I
course not.
think it's important that we try to finish our lives as best we can and not take any shortcuts. It's about the best I can say.
Yeah. So you said in your experience that thought was very reactive when you were on the other side in non-physical life. So do you think that there's a translation in any way between thought and results here in our physical earthly life?
I think you can get a mindset, a concentration that you're going to create something. Let's say I want to move to Kansas and I'm thinking about it a lot, but I'm also taking the steps to move to Kansas. I do think you can manifest things, but it's not magical. It's more common sense, step by step. But on the other side, the closer you are to your higher self, the more thought responsive reality is. I mean, I really believe there's a lot of consensus realities. You can go to, like water seeks its own level. Let's say you're super religious and you're going to go to a reality after you die where you're with other people that share those same point of views. I believe there's a lot of different consensus realities.
So like you experience almost what you expect to experience?
I think it's more complicated than that. I'm not the greatest explainer. Um, so let's say I died tomorrow and I could go to my higher self, but I can also leave that and go to visit relatives that are in an earth-like consensus reality where it looks like the best part of physical reality, the best part, you have a beach and you have a beautiful house and you have, your dog, you're reunited with your dogs and there's people there. I think you can go back and forth. I don't think everybody can go back and forth though. I think there's some people, if you've been to your higher self, you're a better traveler. But there are consensus realities because I think that beach where I saw, the tree of life was a consensus reality and it was more thought reactive. But I think there's also consensus reality when people have very limited beliefs. They're not expecting more. So they go into this physical a copy of physical reality, like, it's their old neighborhood, and Mrs. Jones down the street is there because she's died, and you've got your Aunt Sally and your cousins and your wife and stuff, and you're all there. But I think you can get stuck and limited. Like Robert Monroe talked about the park, and the place, when people get greeted and go to different places. I'm rambling because I can't find the words in the English language to convey it. I'm trying to do the best I can, and there aren't words. There were so many things I figured out on the other side. A lot of it was taken away from me when I came back. I've had flashbacks afterwards, like 30 years afterwards. I've had a flashback and remember something that happened in NDE. Well, it would have been a little more convenient if I had been able to remember it quicker.
Yeah.
I just, had all these things tumbling in my mind. I turned around and wrote a bunch of books just to get it out of my system. But I'm not the go-to person with answers. I can just tell you what happened to me.
Right. Well, you said that you were in that realm where you could see the earth. What do you think that was?
It was really blue. It was big, and there was a lot more ocean than continents. I think that is it was kind of like, I don't like heights. So I'm looking over there and I'm seeing, the earth, and it's like, God, I was just not real happy about it. And I was very glad I wasn't panicking, because I really, really hate heights. So I looked over at it and I thought, I came to the conclusion later on, not right then. This took a few years to process. So physical reality is the crust, and then inside, in the same space, is dimension after dimension, and each dimension gets a little bit more lighter and more thought responsive.
Interesting.
It's just my perception. I could be like so wrong. And then you're going to tell me on the other side, hey, Laura, you messed up. You weren't even close. What I think that's very important is to not romanticize a near-death experience. Don't seek it out, because you may not come back, as healthy as I did. I could have been paralyzed. I could have been injured for life. I could have lost more brain cells. I didn't have any to spare. And also, each person's near-death experience is individual. So it's not all the gospel truth. It's my perception of what happened.
Just like how everybody's life is so different from one another. Or people can grow up in the same household and have a completely different perception of what happened during that time that they were there together, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So you said that you're stubborn and that you feel like you just had to come back and get these things done. Do you think that there's a purpose that you had that you're here to still complete?
I was shown a purpose, and I didn't like it.
You didn't like your purpose?
No.
Are you willing to share it?
Yeah, I didn't think anybody'd be interested, but sure.
I'm interested.
Okay. I use the Hemisync tapes to solicit, to help me.
Yeah. Okay. So
tons of them. I can do it 50 times and maybe get results 1 out of 50. It's just, I'm not that great at it.
And for those who don't know, the Hemisync is where it's using different sound frequencies to try and elicit a certain brainwave state, like a gamma, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it makes you, it opens you up to non-physical reality. People, sometimes. So I'm doing this exercise at an excursion workshop, Robert Monroe, and I've been there all day. And one of the questions was, what is your purpose in this lifetime? Didn't like the answer. I thought it was other things. I saw a table with an IV bag and a pole. And I'm like horrified. It was the illness that I have. It's my purpose to overcome it. And I haven't done that great of a job overcoming it, believe me, sometimes really. And then there was 2 guides, and I'm not happy. I'm not grateful. I'm very irritated. I did not like the answer. I was lukewarm about asking the question, actually. And Um, the word yes just appeared in cursive, like in yellow, but almost like a flame. Yes, this is your purpose. And I could hear it auditory. And it was over. It didn't last that long, maybe 6 seconds. I didn't like it. Was I grateful? I would have liked to had a different answer. I'd always regretted what could I have done with my life if I hadn't had this freaking disease? And I've kind of resented it. I'm not like one of these people that say, oh, autoimmune disease made me a better person. Well, it didn't. It probably made me more crabby. But I'm a happy person, and I push through it, and I do the best I can, and I'm a grateful person. But I would have really liked to sign up for a different purpose in life.
You know what's interesting? This isn't the first time that I've heard that somebody's purpose was to overcome an illness. My last guest was Christian Sunbird, who remembers his pre-birth planning for coming here. And it was the biggest part of why he came here. And he explained that for him, on a soul level, having that experience and that pain was refining his soul in a certain way that was advantageous to his, I don't want to call it soul growth, but to his evolution or his expansion on a soul level. So I think that I really like to hear that, because I think that there are a lot of people who are watching who are experiencing pain. And sometimes we can get resentful for that pain. But if you knew from a higher level that it had a purpose and it wasn't just for nothing, it wasn't just for the suffering for the sake of suffering, I think that that can give people a lot of hope.
Maybe other people, but I didn't like it. I mean, listen, this is not Saint Laura. I'm just a regular person that had a medical nightmare. And I used to say, like, kill me or cure me, just don't let me languish. I mean, I'm good about it. I'm at a great place now in my life, and the disease is managed, but there were a lot of hard years. And if I got all the wisdom of the world, it wouldn't have been it. I wouldn't do it again.
Wow.
So I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I got the feeling from my guides that, when this journey is over, when this life is over, there'll be perhaps one more, and then we're done.
So do you fear death?
No, I just don't want it to hurt on the way out, number one.
Well, it sounds like you've left your body.
Yeah.
Before you felt that.
Yeah, but you can get cancer and suffer. I don't want that. I'm not afraid to die. I'm not worried about it, where I'm going to go. I've already been there. It's not an unknown. It's a known. But what I want to do is I want to have some good years. I want to, I go ballroom dancing and I go out and have a good time. I want to have a little fun. I mean, life's been hard. I want to enjoy myself before I go. I want to have a good time.
I love that. I love that. Well, I want to link in the description below. I would like to link the books that you have, your movie. If you want to share your HemiSync that you use, I think people may have some interest in trying to have an experience that's not a near-death experience. Would you be willing to share that?
Sure. Yeah. William Buhlman is a fantastic author and teacher at Monroe, and he is spot on good explainer how all the stuff works. His CD and his courses are just absolutely fantastic. What I did, I tried to explain paranormal events, out-of-body experience, and near-death experience, but I used fictional characters because I started writing this in my 40s, and I wrote this book series and finish it. And the first one is Near Death Connection. And if you go to the neardeathsaga.com, you'll get descriptions of it. But I never wanted to go on shows or do anything. But when I talked to some different publishing houses, they said, well, you're 50 years old and you've never written anything. No one's going to read your books. But if I told the truth and what happened and how I took real paranormal events and put them in fiction, they would. So I got less embarrassed after 50.
That's awesome.
I just started to do the radio shows and television shows and stuff. But before that, remember, Laura, I did not talk about my near-death experience or any paranormal events, even to my spouse or to my best friends. It was my mom and my sister and my grandmother, who were very receptive and understanding, who had been there and witnessed the stuff. And that was it, because I didn't want to be labeled as a wackadoo or be shamed or be thought as crazy or something,
I can completely understand that. Well, Laura, your experience is absolutely incredible. I think that the biggest thing that I got out of listening to your experience is how we need to make sure that we're not creating harm with another, that we are not affecting somebody else's life force, and that the smallest little things, smiling at somebody, the small kindnesses are some of the biggest things that we can do.
Also, being kind and good to animals counts very big too.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
I'm an animal nut, always have been, done rescue and stuff. It really does, your actions count.
I love that. Laura, thank you so, so much for being my guest and for sharing your story. I really, really am grateful.
Thank you for having me on the show.